6:40, 20 away from 7 o'clock. Good morning to you. We are eating plastic or drinking it on a regular basis. On average, we ingest between 74,000 and 121,000 microplastic particles each year. If you drink bottled water, add another 9,000 plastic particles to that number. Microplastic particles. That can't be good. To talk about the potential severity of that, Dr. Al Johnson of Hyperbaric Centers of Texas joining us on the wake-up call. Doctor, great to have you.
Good morning.
So is this yet another thing we can put on the scary list and alert everybody by running through the streets, or is it, not much to see here, move along? I mean, on the surface, it doesn't sound good.
Yeah, it's not good, but it's not on the completely scary list either. It's as we look at health, we're discovering all kinds of things that may affect our health, and want to be as healthy as possible in our choices. And so over a period of time, we've gotten different chemicals out of the plastic bottles that we drink out of, so it's not leaching the more carcinogenic chemicals. But the softer plastics do deteriorate, and you get those little particles. Now, what eventually happens and what the long-term effects is, we don't know at this point.
So we don't know the health concern here, which is a little bit surprising. I think that, plastic particles have been around for years.
Yeah, they have, and it just, on the extreme, it's like asbestos fibers. We didn't know what they did for years either until they produced, cancer 20 years later or 30 years later. So I don't point that out to be scary. It just, if we're really health-minded, then it's best to use glass bottled water or the real hard plastic water bottles. Those are the safest instead of the softer ones that you squeeze and pinch and bust the little particles off of, or that heat up and give off different chemicals. So that's the message at this time.
So you talked about the softer plastics out there, and I think everybody that's a parent is familiar with the BPA-free that we see on labels and different plastics. Is there one that we can kind of keep an eye out for? Is there a type of plastic or a rating of plastic that we need to kind of make sure we don't have in our cupboards or refrigerators?
Well, at this point, the study didn't point to any particular ones, but the food-grade plastic, you go on and research the food-grade plastics, and they are the least outgassing, give off the least particles to our knowledge at this point. Now, the other thing I tell my patients that are very sensitive to chemical odors and fumes and really health-minded is you don't microwave in plastic, even though it says microwavable, that you take the food out, put it in glass, and microwave it in glass, because you heat up the plastic and it changes the composition, degrades it, and you really don't know what you get.
Good point. Another thing we should talk about, too, is bottled water that has been heated up in, like, say, the car over, a hot afternoon, or that's been, in the hot garage. Is there? Some people will say that is a myth as far as the severity of breast cancer, that it increases those chances. What say you as far as heated bottled water in the car?
Well, yeah, you don't like that to happen because that does affect it. Now, to what effect it is on you as an individual and long-term, we don't know at this point. The real health-minded, concerned person, I encourage them to, as we said, to use glass bottled water, and then you don't have to ask that question and wait around and be concerned about it.
Yeah, right.
You're there with the glass, and that's safe.
Yeah, and I guess another thing we talk about, when people are using when they're working out or running and they use their water bottles, I know of one person in particular that never washes it out. Just kind of rinses it out, and there's bacteria and things. I'm sure other things. That's a whole other discussion to talk about.
Exactly, and if you use, have reverse osmosis and filtered water at home, you're taking out the chlorine. So then that does enhance the chance of bacteria if you store water, because it doesn't have the antibacterial factor of the chlorine in it. So that water that goes through that process is meant to be consumed right away. And it's best to wash those bottles out, clean them if you use them and store water for any length of time in them.
Dr. Al Johnson joining us from the Hyperbaric Centers of Texas. We'll talk to you, if we can, real quick, because my co-host, Buddy, is a huge fan of the Hyperbarics, as I am. When you're maybe on a plane flying back from a conference and somebody goes, Hyperbarics, what is that all about? What's your best pitch? What say you?
The best pitch is that it's the one thing in medicine that heals tissues that have been damaged. Tissues need oxygen and glucose, and with a true hyperbaric chamber, you increase the oxygen to the tissues 10 times. So you heal tissues that have been damaged, like from stroke. You heal tissues that have been damaged from infections, encephalitis, where it affects the brain, traumatic brain injury, concussions, sports injuries, toxic exposures. I see a lot of people with mold exposure from their homes where they get neurological symptoms where they can't think, they get fatigue, they get numbness, tingling, gastrointestinal problems. All that is due to a toxin that the mold produces that's neurotoxic. They're called mycotoxins. You can go to my website and find out more about all this at johnsonmedicalassociates.com or hyperbaric-centers-of-Texas.com.
How long have you been involved, and how did you find out about it? And, I mean, it was one of the things I'm sure you were curious about and wanted to jump into, and finally you did.
Yeah, well, for years, I've been in this medicine business for 30 years dealing with environmental factors on health. And back in the 80s, we had pesticide exposures, which affect the nervous system. We had solvents before MSDS sheets were really out and available that people got exposed to that affect the nervous system. I was looking at ways to heal this because there isn't a medication that actually heals the system, the nervous system or the body. They all assist in fighting infections, changing metabolic processes, but they don't heal. And hyperbaric oxygen, that's breathing 100% oxygen under pressure in a chamber, is the only thing that really heals the tissues. And they started working with cerebral palsy kids, which were deprived of oxygen at the time of birth, and they were getting better. And so I said, well, why won't this work on people with other types of oxygen deprivation or neural system injury? Looked at the literature around the world, and sure enough, around the world, they were using it for that. So there's a whole host of literature outside the United States that supports the use of hyperbaric in stroke, in encephalitis, in sports injuries, in toxic exposures.
So have Texans as a whole discovered and embraced the hyperbaric benefits, or has it been kind of a slow-moving process that gradually they kind of come around?
Oh, it's a gradual process. Things in medicine move kind of slowly, as you probably know. It was 10 years before doctors accepted the theory of H. pylori, a bacteria causing ulcers. So the people that have experienced it, that think outside the box, are saying, how can I get healed and go through and do hyperbaric, are always amazed at what is accomplished with it. I had one young man that had an unusual stroke that was like 40 years of age. His left side was paralyzed. He'd been through rehab for 3 months. Said, I think it feels like my leg wants to work, but I just can't get it going. Put him in hyperbaric. 30 minutes later, he was moving that leg. That's a dramatic story, but if those cells are there ready to be rehabbed on a stroke, there's a dead area. Then around that stroke, there's idle cells, which have been damaged. And so that's what the hyperbaric helps heal.
Amazing. Doctor, great to go ahead and give the website again if you could.
Yes, it's johnsonmedicalassociates.com or Hyperbaric Centers of Texas.com.
Very good. Dr. Johnson, great to have you on the show. Have a great weekend and happy Father's Day if it applies.
Thank you. You too. Have a healthy one.
Absolutely. Dr. Al Johnson,